The air was heavy that evening, a stillness before something fierce. The sky had turned an unsettling gray, as though the heavens were watching, waiting. Amina stood at the edge of her hut, clutching a worn shawl around her shoulders, her bare feet pressing into the damp soil. Her eyes followed the horizon where lightning flickered, far away but drawing closer, like a secret approaching. The village of Yumuk buzzed quietly with unease. Chickens scattered under eaves, women pulled clothes off the lines, and children were called in with urgent voices. Everyone could sense the storm building, the kind of storm that wasn't just rain but a warning. Inside Amina's heart, a different storm was already raging. Her husband Okoro had changed. Once gentle and full of laughter, he now carried pride like a weapon. The wealth he had gained from trade had made his heart cold and his words sharper than knives. For weeks, Amina had lived as though treading on thorns, her silence mistaken for weakness, her patience for submission. As thunder rolled again, Okoro emerged from the shadows of their compound, his tall frame tense, his jaw set hard. "You think this rain will wash away your sins?" he said coldly. Amina blinked, confused. "Sins?" Her voice trembled. "I've done nothing, my husband." He scoffed, stepping closer. "You've done nothing, and that is your sin. A woman who cannot bring fortune to her husband is a curse." His words struck her like stones. The man she once loved now looked at her as if she were something to discard. The first drops of rain began to fall, soft, hesitant, tapping on her arms, her face, her shawl. She whispered, "Okoro, we took vows before God and the ancestors. Do not let anger blind you." He turned his back, his hand clenching around a staff. "The ancestors have already spoken," he muttered. "They told me to cleanse my home." Her stomach turned cold. "What do you mean?" But before she could step forward, Okoro lifted the latch on the gate and pointed to the darkening path outside. "Leave," he said. "Leave now, before the storm catches you." Rain now poured in sheets, thunder booming above them. The village was a blur of motion, people running, doors slamming, yet Amina's world stood still. She stared at him, her voice breaking. "You would throw your wife into the storm?" Okoro's eyes, once full of love, were now empty. "The storm will judge you," he said simply and turned away. The sky cracked open with light. The rain came down harder. Amina stepped out into it, her shawl clinging to her, her tears mixing with the cold drops on her face. Each step felt heavier than the last, her heart pounding not from fear but disbelief. As the thunder roared above, she whispered to the heavens, "If I must fall, let the sky remember me." Behind her, Okoro stood in the doorway, shadowed by lightning, watching the woman he once swore to protect vanish into the storm. He did not yet know, the storm was listening. The heavens broke open in full fury. Rain lashed down with relentless power, hammering the earth and drowning all sound in its wrath. The once red village paths became rivers of mud, swirling and deep. Amina walked through it barefoot, her feet sinking with every step, her soaked shawl clinging to her body like a second skin. The storm was merciless, and yet it felt alive. It howled through the trees as if speaking in tongues, carrying the cries of the wind and the heartbeat of the sky. Lightning tore across the clouds in blinding streaks, each flash revealing Amina's trembling form, her face pale, her eyes lost, her lips whispering prayers swallowed by the thunder. "Ancestors," she murmured through chattering teeth, "if I have wronged him, judge me, but if I have been wronged, let the sky bear witness." Her voice cracked and disappeared beneath the sound of the storm. She could barely see, her vision blurred by tears and rain, but she pressed on, refusing to fall. Behind her, the lights of Yumuk village flickered faintly before being swallowed by darkness. She was truly alone. Okoro's words still burned in her mind. "A curse. Cleanse my home." The cruelty of it pierced deeper than the cold. They had shared years, laughter by the fire, dreams under starlight, and now she was nothing to him but a burden. Her heart ached not from the rain but from betrayal's wound, sharp and deep. Thunder shook the ground beneath her feet. She stumbled, fell to her knees, her palms sinking into wet mud. The rain pounded her head, washing away her tears as if the sky itself was trying to erase her sorrow. She looked up and screamed into the darkness, "What have I done to deserve this?" For a moment the only answer was the storm's rage. But then through the noise she thought she heard something, a low hum almost like a song carried by the wind. It came and went, soft yet powerful, weaving between the thunderclaps. She blinked, straining to hear. It wasn't human. It was something else, something ancient. Amina wrapped her arms around herself and looked around wildly. The trees bent in the wind, their branches whipping, and for a heartbeat she thought she saw a figure standing beneath one, tall, shadowed, unmoving. Lightning flashed and it was gone. Her heart raced. She stumbled backward, slipping in the mud, her breath coming fast. "Who's there?" she called, her voice nearly drowned by the rain. No answer. Only the wind. Only the rhythm of the storm that seemed to grow stronger around her. She continued walking, but now the rain felt different, not punishing, not cruel. The air around her thickened with energy, and with every drop that touched her skin, warmth spread beneath the cold. The storm that had once seemed to push her down now felt like it was lifting her up, step by step, unseen hands steadying her. By the time she reached the edge of the forest, her strength was nearly gone. She collapsed under a large palm tree, her chest heaving, her hair plastered against her face. Lightning flashed across the sky again, and she caught sight of her reflection in a shallow puddle beside her, dirt-streaked, trembling but still alive. In that reflection, for just a second, she saw something else, her own face glowing faintly with blue light, as though the storm's power had touched her. She blinked and it was gone. Exhausted, Amina laid her head against the wet earth, whispering, "If this is the end, let me rest in peace." But the storm did not let her rest. Thunder rolled again, but this time it felt closer, deeper, like a voice. The rain softened to a steady rhythm, almost like a heartbeat, and she felt warmth spreading from the ground beneath her. When she opened her eyes, she saw something impossible. The puddle beside her was glowing faintly, swirling patterns of light dancing across the water's surface. The wind whispered again, words she couldn't understand, but somehow she felt their meaning. "You are not alone." Amina's breath caught in her throat. Her pain dulled, replaced by awe and confusion. She lifted her face toward the rain, and it no longer stung her skin. It felt soft, healing, as though the storm itself had chosen her. As lightning flashed one final time, illuminating her drenched form, she whispered weakly, "Then let the storm take me, and make me new." And with that, Amina closed her eyes, surrendering to the will of the rain. The world went silent around her, except for the steady rhythm of the downpour, and the faint hum of the sky that seemed to cradle her like a child. The woman the world had cast away was gone. But something else, something stronger, was being born beneath the storm. When Amina woke, the rain had softened into a steady rhythm, falling like 1,000 whispering hands upon the earth. The sky was still gray, but its fury had passed. Mist curled through the trees, blurring the horizon in silver haze. Her skin was cold, her clothes heavy, yet her heart beat steady and calm as if something inside her had changed. She sat slowly, her fingers sinking into the wet soil, feeling the heartbeat of the land beneath her palms. The puddle beside her still shimmered faintly, its glow dimming with the fading storm. She looked around, confused. The forest was silent except for the rain's gentle murmur. Where am I?" she whispered, her voice trembling with exhaustion. The air around her answered with a low hum, the same sound she had heard before collapsing. It rose and fell like a song, woven into the sound of the rain. Then she heard it again, clearer this time, a woman's voice, soft and deep as thunder rolling far away. "Child of tears, why do you bow your head?" Amina froze. The hairs on her arms rose as the voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. She turned in circles, scanning the mist, but there was no one. I was cast out," she stammered. "My husband left me to die. The rain took pity on me." "No," the voice said, the tone almost gentle. "The rain does not pity. It chooses." Lightning flickered far away, casting a pale glow over the forest, and in that brief flash Amina saw her, a tall figure draped in white, her skin dark as polished earth, her eyes glimmering like molten silver. She stood among the trees, rain falling through her as though she were made of mist. Amina's breath caught. "Who are you?" The woman smiled, a calm curve that carried the weight of centuries. "I am who the rain remembers. When your tears reached the sky, I heard. You called not for death, but for truth." The forest seemed to breathe with her words. The leaves trembled though no wind moved. Amina lowered her head, overwhelmed. "Then, why am I still alive?" The spirit stepped closer, her presence rippling the puddles at her feet. "Because the storm is not your enemy. It is your mirror. He cast you into it thinking it would drown you. But water does not destroy its own reflection, it reveals it." Amina blinked back tears. "He took everything. My home. My name. My peace. And now the storm will give you what he took, not gold, not comfort, but power born from truth." The spirit knelt before her, her eyes locking with Amina's. For the first time, Amina saw herself reflected within those eyes, the same mud-streaked face, but glowing faintly with blue light. Her pain, her heartbreak, her strength, All mirrored back at her. "Rise," the spirit whispered. "The storm has claimed you." A rush of wind surrounded Amina, circling her like invisible hands. Her soaked dress lifted slightly as the rain around her seemed to move in rhythm with her heartbeat. The puddles shimmered and she felt something warm pulse through her veins, like lightning made gentle. Her scars, her bruises, even the ache in her body began to fade. She could feel the world differently, the pulse of roots beneath her, the vibration of raindrops before they fell, the quiet hum of the air around her. "What is happening to me?" she breathed. "You are remembering what your blood already knew," said the spirit. "The women before you carried storms in their hearts, healers, warriors, truth speakers. You are their daughter." The words sank deep and Amina's trembling stopped. The fear that had consumed her since that night began to melt away, replaced by something fierce, calm but unyielding like thunder before it strikes. The spirit reached out a translucent hand and touched her forehead. The moment their skin met, Amina saw flashes, women standing in the rain through generations, their faces familiar and strong, their eyes blazing with the same light. A chant filled her ears, old and powerful. "What is broken must return to the sky. What is cast out must rise again." The vision faded, and Amina found herself kneeling once more, breathless. The spirit was gone. The rain continued to fall, soft and steady, but now it sounded like music, a song she somehow understood. She rose slowly to her feet. Her clothes clung to her, but she no longer felt the cold. Her heart beat with quiet power. The storm had not killed her, it had remade her. When she looked into the puddle again, her reflection no longer looked helpless. It looked royal. Her eyes glowed faintly, her posture unbroken, her face serene yet unyielding. She touched the surface and ripples spread out like rings of light. "Then let them see the woman they tried to destroy," she whispered. And with that, Amina turned toward the village, the rain parting around her as if the storm itself was clearing her path. The sky growled softly in approval. The storm ended as suddenly as it had begun. By dawn, the village of Umuk shimmered under a pale, washed blue sky. The air smelled of wet earth and renewal, but beneath that freshness lingered a tension no one could name. Roofs dripped with last night's rain, the ground glistened with puddles that mirrored the sunrise, and the villagers moved carefully, still haunted by thunder's memory. Men repaired fences, women swept the courtyards, and children tiptoed through the mud whispering, "Did you hear her cry last night? They say the spirits took her." Others shook their heads. "No one survives a storm like that," said one. "If she lived, it was not as a woman anymore." And then someone gasped. Down the long red road leading from the forest, a figure was walking slowly toward the village, barefoot, her dress torn and heavy with dried mud, yet her steps steady, her head held high. A faint mist followed her, catching the early sunlight, wrapping her in a ghostly halo. It was Amina. The same woman they had seen cast out, thrown into the rain to die. But something was different now, something in the way she moved, something in the silence that followed her. Even the air seemed to shift when she passed. Her skin glistened faintly, not with sweat, but with a soft sheen of light that shimmered when the sun touched it. Her hair, still damp, framed her face like a crown, and her eyes, deep, unblinking, reflected the morning sky itself. She looked neither angry nor broken. She looked awakened. The villagers froze where they stood. Buckets slipped from hands, hose dropped into the mud. A dog barked once and went quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "Is it her ghost?" someone whispered. Amina kept walking, each step calm, deliberate. She looked at the familiar huts, the fields where she used to work, the faces of those who had turned away when she cried for help. And she smiled, not with bitterness, but with a serenity that made their hearts tremble. "Mama Ajide," she said softly as she passed the old matriarch who had watched her suffering in silence. "You told me no woman survives a man's curse. You were wrong." The old woman stepped back, clutching her wrapper, her eyes wide. The morning light caught Amina's face, and for a heartbeat everyone saw it, the faint reflection of lightning in her pupils. Word spread like fire through dry grass. "Amina is back." She came from the storm. The rain brought her home. Children ran through the alleys shouting, and soon even the elders came out to see for themselves. From every doorway eyes followed her, some with fear, others with awe. When she reached the center of the village, Amina stopped. There stood Okoro, her husband, startled and pale. His eyes widened as he saw her, the woman he had abandoned under the storm's wrath. For a long moment they said nothing. The village around them fell utterly silent. Amina's gaze was steady, piercing through him like sunlight through mist. He looked away, shame twisting his face. You, he stammered, his voice barely audible. You should be dead. Amina tilted her head slightly, her voice calm, almost gentle. You built your peace on my pain, Okoro. But peace built on cruelty cannot last. He took a step back. Witchcraft, he muttered. You've come back with dark power. Her eyes flickered with hurt, then softened. No, she said. I came back with the truth you tried to bury. Lightning rumbled faintly in the distance, though the sky was clear. The sound made everyone flinch. Amina walked past him, her bare feet leaving faint imprints of water on the dry ground, though the rain had stopped hours ago. She stopped before the elder's hut, where the oldest of them, Baba Ifani, sat watching her with wary curiosity. You've seen storms, Baba, she said respectfully. You know the rain can destroy, but it can also bless. Which one do you think I am now? The old man studied her carefully. In her eyes he saw no madness, no vengeance, only strength, quiet and unshakable. He nodded slowly. The storm chose you, he murmured. And who are we to question the sky? A whisper spread through the crowd. The storm chose her. Amina looked up at the clear blue sky, where the clouds were drifting apart like curtains pulled back to reveal the sun. Yes, she said softly. And I will choose what comes next. She turned and began walking toward her old hut, the one she had been cast out of, and with every step, the air shimmered faintly behind her as if the rain itself still followed in her shadow. No one dared to stop her. Not even Okoro. And as she entered the home she was once forbidden to touch, a low roll of thunder echoed far away, not angry but approving like the laughter of the gods. The storm had taken her side. And everyone in Yumuk knew it. Inside the hut, the air smelled of damp earth and ashes. Everything was just as Amina had left it. The broken stool in the corner, the empty clay pots, the torn mat she used to sleep on. Only now it felt smaller, quieter, but not dead. She stepped inside slowly, her bare feet pressing into the cool mud. Each step echoed softly, like footsteps in a sacred place. She looked around, tracing her fingers along the cracked wall. This was the same space where she had cried herself to sleep countless nights, where she had begged for warmth and love, and found only silence. Now that silence seemed to hum with energy. Outside, the villagers lingered in uneasy wonder. They whispered her name like a prayer, or a warning. She's come back to curse him, one man murmured. No, said another, his voice trembling. She's come back to remind us. Okoro stood apart from them all, his breath shallow, his face pale. He stared at the hut, at the faint blue light flickering from its cracks, like the sky itself had taken residence inside. He remembered the night he'd thrown her out, how she'd cried his name as thunder answered her instead. He had thought it was over then, that no one would question him. But now, as the air thickened with something unexplainable, fear crawled into his chest. Inside, Amina knelt down where she once used to grind millet. The same place she had fallen the night he cast her out. She placed her hand on the mud and to her surprise, it pulsed faintly under her palm. I thought you were my grave, she whispered to the earth. But you were only waiting for me to rise. A drop of water fell from the roof and landed on her hand. Then another. But it wasn't raining. The water came from nowhere, clear and shining, forming tiny ripples across the floor. She looked up, and in the sunlight that poured through the cracks she saw mist forming shapes in the air. The storm had not left her. It was inside her now. A soft voice filled the room, not the spirit from the forest, but something gentler, closer, as though the air itself was speaking. They built a throne from your tears. Now sit upon it. Amina's chest tightened. She looked down at the ground again, the same mud Okoro had cursed her with. Slowly she touched it with both hands and began to shape it, her fingers moving with strange instinct. The villagers outside fell silent as they saw her silhouette through the hut's doorway, shaping something in the dim light. Okoro's voice broke the quiet. Stop this madness, he shouted, stepping forward. You will not shame me again. But when he tried to cross the threshold, the air shifted. A gust of wind struck him back as if invisible hands had pushed him. The same storm that once destroyed him now protected her. Amina didn't even look up. Her voice was calm. I asked for nothing but love, Okoro. You gave me humiliation instead. You wanted a throne? Then here it is. As she spoke, the mud beneath her began to rise, slowly, impossibly, shaping itself under her touch. A mound first, then a seat, then the delicate curve of a backrest, formed entirely from the earth and rainwater that filled the hut. It gleamed faintly with the same light that shimmered on her skin. The villagers gasped. She's building a throne, someone whispered. When it was done, Amina stood and looked at it, the throne of mud, alive with a soft pulse of blue. She smiled faintly, tears mixing with rainwater on her cheeks. You destroyed me to build your pride, she said softly, her gaze on Okoro. But even the earth remembers the hands that bled on it. Okoro could bear it no longer. He stormed forward, shouting, You dare mock me in front of my people? He snatched up a stick and raised it toward her, but before he could swing, thunder cracked across the sky. The villagers ducked as wind rushed through the square, even though the sky above was clear. Lightning struck the stick in his hand. It exploded into ash. Amina did not move. She only stared at him with quiet pity. You still do not understand, she said. The storm was never against me. Okoro stumbled backward, falling to his knees, his face twisted with disbelief and fear. What are you? He whispered. I am what you made me, Amina replied. But also what the rain returned. She turned, lowered herself, and sat upon the throne of mud. The moment her body touched it, the ground glowed faintly, and the faint hum of thunder rolled across the village once more. The villagers fell to their knees, some in worship, others in fear. Okoro could only stare, the man who once ruled with arrogance, now trembling before the woman he had discarded. The storm's daughter had taken her seat. And for the first time justice breathed in Yumyuk. No one dared move. The air around Amina vibrated with energy, a quiet, low hum that seemed to come from the ground itself. The sunlight dimmed though there were no clouds yet. The birds that had begun their morning songs suddenly went silent, as though nature itself waited to see what she would do. Amina sat perfectly still on her throne of mud, her posture regal, her gaze steady. Every breath she took seemed to carry weight, the weight of all she had endured and the justice that had come for it. Okoro knelt before her, eyes wild, his pride stripped bare. Mud streaked his face, his hands shaking. Around him, villagers gathered in a wide circle, their eyes darting between him and the woman they had once pitied and mocked. Forgive me, he croaked at last, his voice breaking. Amina, I was misled. I thought. You thought the world was yours to shape as you pleased, she interrupted softly. You thought a woman's pain meant nothing. Her words were calm, but each syllable struck like a drumbeat. The villagers flinched with every one. Do you know what the storm told me, Okoro? She continued, rising slowly from her throne. Her body shimmered faintly as if the rain's glow still lived beneath her skin. It told me that every injustice leaves an echo, and the sky remembers them all. As she spoke, a cool wind swept through the square. The villagers shivered. The once clear sky began to darken at the edges, a thin line of gray clouds curling over the horizon. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of rain that had not yet fallen. A child whispered, The storm, it's coming back. Amina turned her gaze to the villagers, the ones who had watched her thrown into the rain, the ones who had turned away when she begged for help. Her voice was steady, but sorrow trembled underneath. You watched him destroy me. You heard my cries and said nothing. You believed that silence would keep you safe. Her eyes filled with tears that glistened but did not fall. But silence does not protect anyone. It only feeds the storm. Lightning flickered faintly across the distant sky. The villagers fell to their knees, their fear mixing with guilt. We were afraid, cried Mama Ajide. We feared his wrath, his power. Amina's expression softened, but only slightly. And so you gave him mine. She raised her hand toward the sky. The wind howled louder, swirling dust and leaves around her feet. I was the one cast out. I was the one meant to die. Yet the storm took me in, and showed me the truth. Okoro covered his head, shouting over the growing wind. Please, call it off. You have the power, just stop it. She looked down at him, not with vengeance but with something more piercing. Compassion heavy with pain. Do you think I control the storm? She asked. No, Okoro. The storm controls itself. It answers to truth, not me. Thunder boomed above. The sky grew darker, shadows racing across the village. Yet no rain fell, not yet. The air waited, trembling with tension. Okoro began to sob. I wronged you, he gasped. I was proud, blind. I listened to my fears instead of my heart. Then let the sky hear your confession, Amina said quietly. He raised his face, drenched in tears and sweat. I cast her out, he shouted to the heavens. I thought she was cursed, but it was my own heart that was cursed. I see it now. I see it. For a heartbeat all sound ceased. Even the wind stopped. Then slowly the clouds began to break apart. Shafts of light pierced through, golden and soft. The villagers looked up in awe. The storm that had threatened to return began to retreat instead, rolling away across the hills like a lion satisfied after the hunt. Amina closed her eyes, breathing deeply. When she opened them again, the faint blue glow was fading. She looked at Okoro, broken, trembling, human. "You were my storm," she said softly. "But I became my calm." She stepped closer, the mud thrown behind her glistening in the new sunlight. She knelt beside him, the man who had once towered over her, and whispered, "You will live, Okoro. Not to rule, not to boast, but to remember." He looked up, confusion flickering through his eyes. "You forgive me?" Amina gave a faint smile, the kind that carries both sorrow and peace. "Forgiveness is not for you. It is for me. So that the storm does not live in my heart forever." The villagers began to weep, quietly, reverently. Some fell to the ground, some clasped their hands, whispering prayers of repentance. The air was light again, but no one dared to speak loudly. Amina stood, looking at her mud throne one last time. Its shape was beginning to soften in the sunlight, melting slowly back into the earth. She walked to it, placed her hand gently upon it, and murmured, "You were never meant to last, only to remind." Then she turned back to the crowd and said, "The storm spares no liar, but it also redeems the truthful. Let Yumyuk remember that." Her voice carried like music through the still air, and the wind sighed once more, gentle, approving, like a mother's hand over her child. And then, as the villagers bowed their heads, Amina walked away from the hut, her feet leaving faint traces of water that shimmered and vanished behind her. The sky was bright now. But in that brightness, every soul who had seen her knew, the storm would never be forgotten. The next morning Yumyuk looked different. The storm had passed completely, but its presence lingered in the fresh scent of wet earth and the glistening leaves. The village that once felt heavy with gossip and greed now shimmered under soft sunlight. It was as if the land itself had been washed of its shame. Children ran barefoot through puddles, their laughter breaking the silence that had once haunted the streets. The men repaired fallen roofs, the women cleaned the pathways, and for the first time in years, no one spoke in whispers. They spoke openly, about truth, about guilt, about change. Amina walked among them, her bare feet leaving light footprints in the damp soil. Her presence drew eyes wherever she went, not out of fear or pity now, but reverence. Her simple wrapper clung to her frame, drying under the warmth of the morning sun, and her hair caught streaks of gold as she moved. Mama Ijide, the oldest woman in the village, hobbled toward her, clutching a small gourd of palm wine. Her eyes were swollen from crying. "Amina," she said in a trembling voice, "we failed you. We failed ourselves. The God sent you back to remind us what we became." Amina looked at her, then gently placed a hand over Mama Ijide's. "The God sent the storm," she said quietly. "I only listened." The old woman's eyes filled with tears. "And now," she asked, "what will you do, child?" Amina's gaze lifted toward the center of the village, toward the space where Okoro's grand hut once stood, now nothing more than broken mud and splintered wood. For a long moment she said nothing. Then softly, "We rebuild. But not with pride. With truth." By midday the whole village had gathered. The air was full of the sounds of hammering, laughter, and chanting, the rhythm of life beginning again. The elders watched as Amina stood in the middle of the clearing, guiding the young ones and stacking the first new bricks. "Not high," she reminded them. "A throne that touches the sky forgets the ground that made it." Her words made them pause. They smiled, nodding. The new structure began to take shape, simple, balanced, beautiful in its humility. A circle of stones at the base, then a single carved seat made of polished wood. No gold. No ornaments. Just strength. As they worked, Amina caught sight of Okoro in the distance. He was helping mend a roof, his once royal garments now tattered, his movements quiet. Every so often he looked toward her, not with the arrogance he once carried, but with silent gratitude and shame. When he approached her later, his hands were covered in clay. "Amina," he began, hesitating. "The people look to you now. You have the wisdom to lead." She met his eyes, calm, unwavering. "No one should lead alone," she said. "The storm came to remind us that power without heart destroys everything it touches." He bowed his head. "And what of me? What place do I have left here?" Amina thought for a long moment before replying. "A man who has broken the world must learn to build again. You will teach the children, not stories of thrones and power, but of what happens when we forget that hearts can break." Okoro's lips trembled. He nodded slowly, tears threatening again. "Then I will build," he said. By evening the sun dipped low, painting the sky in soft pink and violet. The villagers gathered around the new circle, their new heart. Amina stood before them, her face glowing in the sunset. "The storm took much from us," she began. "Homes, pride, certainty. But it gave us something greater, the chance to begin again, not as rulers or servants but as one people." She looked around at their faces, the old, the young, the once proud, the once silent. "Let this place remind us that no one builds a throne on another's tears," she said. "And if anyone forgets, the sky will remember." A deep hush fell. Then someone began to sing, a low, trembling song of forgiveness and rebirth. One by one, others joined, their voices blending into harmony. The melody carried over the village, over the trees, and into the evening air like a blessing. Amina closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her. She could almost hear the whisper of the storm again, but now it was soft, approving, like a mother humming her child to sleep. She smiled, turning toward the fading horizon. The rain had given her pain, then purpose. The sky had given her fear, then strength. And now, it gave her peace. The last light of the day touched her face, and the villagers saw her not just as the woman who returned, but as the spirit who showed them how to rise. And in that light, Yumyuk finally breathed freely again. As dusk fell upon Yumyuk, the sky seemed to remember her. A faint rumble rolled through the distance, not the roar of anger this time, but a low hum, like the earth itself was sighing with relief. The storm that once came to destroy now returned to bless. Amina stood on the rise overlooking the village. Her simple white dress fluttered in the soft wind, the fabric glowing faintly in the amber light. Below her, the villagers gathered, faces upturned, eyes wide with reverence. They whispered her name as though it carried power, not as the woman they once scorned, but as the spirit who had faced the storm and lived. Children ran around her feet, laughing and throwing petals of hibiscus and wildflowers. Elders hummed old songs of gratitude, their voices trembling with both faith and disbelief. Mama Ijide, holding a calabash of palm oil, poured it on the ground and murmured, "The storm has a daughter, and her name is Amina." Amina's gaze drifted upward, where the last clouds of the storm floated lazily across the glowing sky. The light painted her face in shades of bronze and gold. She closed her eyes and whispered to the wind, "You never came to end me, you came to free me." Okoro stood at the edge of the crowd, half hidden in the shadows. He looked thinner, humbler. His once proud eyes now held quiet humility. He watched her with awe, the woman he'd left to die, now standing above him like a living embodiment of mercy. He stepped forward hesitantly. The crowd parted silently, sensing the tension that still lingered between them. When he reached her, he knelt in the damp soil, lowering his head. "Amina," he said softly, his voice rough with regret. "I was blind. I thought power was a throne built of others' pain. But I see now, you were the crown I threw away." Amina looked down at him. The people waited, breathless, wondering if vengeance would finally speak. But her expression was calm, not cold, not cruel, just still, like the surface of a river after rain. "You destroyed me to build your throne," she said slowly, her voice carrying across the clearing. "But I sat on it first because I learned to rule my pain before you ever ruled your pride." Okoro's eyes filled with tears. He bowed lower, his voice breaking. "I have no right to stand before you." Amina took a step closer. "You have the right to live," she said. "But live differently. Build what heals, not what hurts. The gods don't need your punishment, they already gave you memory." The villagers began to hum again, a deep sound that vibrated through the earth. The drums picked up, steady and slow. The air seemed alive with warmth, and even the wind began to circle around Amina, lifting her braids slightly, as if the storm itself had come to embrace her. Suddenly, a streak of lightning danced across the distant horizon, not fierce but beautiful, like a line of silver drawn across the heavens. The people gasped, bowing their heads instinctively. But Amina lifted her face to it and smiled. She raised her arms, palms open, and spoke to the sky. "If the storm comes again, let it not come for wrath. Let it come for cleansing. Let it remind us that the earth and sky are one, and so are we." The wind rushed through the village, bending the palm leaves, stirring the dust in gentle spirals. Children squealed with delight as the cool air brushed their faces. It was as though the storm itself answered her, not in thunder but in song. When the moment quieted, Amina turned to the people. "We all faced the rain," she said softly. "But not all of us drowned. That means we were chosen, not to rule but to remember." Mama Ijide stepped forward, holding a beaded crown woven with white shells and threads of blue cloth. She held it out to Amina, her old hands trembling. "You are our queen now, child," she whispered. Amina looked at the crown, simple, pure, beautiful, and then slowly shook her head. "No," she said. "The storm does not crown one. It crowns all who endure it." She lifted the crown instead toward the sky, letting the wind carry it. It spun upward, catching the last rays of sunset before vanishing into the horizon. The crowd gasped, but Amina only smiled. "Let the gods wear it," she said. "They earned it with me." The drums beat louder. The people began to dance, slow at first, then wild and joyous, their laughter echoing across the open land. For the first time in years, the rhythm was not of mourning but of victory. And in the heart of it all, Amina, the woman who had faced rain, betrayal, and death, danced barefoot in the mud she once cried upon. Her laughter rose into the evening sky, bright and free, as if even the clouds above joined in her joy. The storm had taken her once. Now it carried her name. Years passed. Seasons changed, and the village of Yumyuk blossomed again. What was once a place of silence and sorrow became a land of laughter, trade, and song. Crops grew strong, streams ran full, and the air always carried the faint, sweet scent of rain, as if the storm had chosen never to leave entirely. Children played barefoot in the fields, splashing through puddles even on dry days, giggling that, "Mama Amina is blessing us." To them, rain was no longer a curse. It was a memory of courage, a song of rebirth. And every evening, when the sun dipped low and the air turned gold, the villagers would gather beneath the great baobab tree at the edge of the clearing. There sat Baba Chaik, the storyteller, his voice deep and warm, his eyes reflecting years of wonder. The children would lean in close as he began the story that every generation in Yumyuk knew by heart. "Once," he would say, "there was a woman named Amina, a woman the rain refused to bury." He would tell it slowly, his words rolling like thunder. How Amina was cast out by love turned cruel. How the skies broke open to defend her. How she rose from the mud, reborn in the storm's heart. How she forgave, rebuilt, and taught the people that power means nothing without compassion. The children would listen wide-eyed, their faces glowing in the light of the fire. Some would glance upward at the clouds that always drifted gently above Yumyuk, wondering if Amina was still up there, watching, waiting. "When the rain falls," Baba Chaik would whisper, "you must never run from it. Stand in it. Feel it. For that is how the gods speak to those who listen." He would pause then, staring into the fire. She was the storm's bride, not because she married it, but because she understood it. It raged for her, cried for her, and finally bowed to her. One evening, as he told the story, a soft drizzle began to fall. The fire hissed and sputtered, but no one moved. The children only looked upward, giggling, letting the drops kiss their cheeks. Baba Chaik smiled. "See? She visits us still," he murmured. The elders nodded. "She never left," one said softly. "The rain is her laughter now." In that moment, a low rumble rolled across the sky, gentle, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. The villagers lifted their faces to it, eyes closed, smiling. They knew that sound. It was her, the whisper of the woman who once knelt in the mud, now echoing in the sky that had once condemned her. Later that night, when the rain had passed, a rainbow arched above Yumyuk, faint but full. The moonlight made it shimmer silver instead of color, and the people said that was her crown, the one she'd given to the gods, returned to remind them she still watched. Baba Chaik finished his tale in a hush, his final words soft but unshakable. "And so," he said, "when a storm rises, when thunder rolls and the wind bends the trees, do not fear. It is not anger. It is remembrance. It is Amina, the woman who turned sorrow into light. The one who sat upon the throne that tried to destroy her, and left it shining for all." As the fire died down, the children would fall asleep on their mothers' laps, the rain still dripping from the leaves. The village glowed softly in the night, the huts reflecting moonlight off damp thatch. And sometimes, just sometimes, a flash of light would move across the horizon, too soft to be lightning, too swift to be wind. It would curve and shimmer, then vanish. Those who saw it never spoke loudly about it, but they all felt the same truth stirring in their chests. She was still there, watching, smiling, protecting. The storm had taken her side once. Now she was the storm. And from that day onward, in every rainfall, every whisper of thunder, and every glint of light that touched the wet soil of Yumyuk, Amina's story lived on. The woman left to die in the rain had become eternal. The people would always say, "The storm remembers its own."